All right, today we're tackling a really intense topic, bath salts. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Like something you'd use for a relaxing soak? Well, let me tell you, that could not be further from the truth. What we're actually talking about has absolutely nothing to do with your bathtub.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's not from a horror movie script. That is a real, documented event. And honestly, it's not some one-off, isolated case. We're talking about stories of people slashing themselves to get rid of imaginary wires in their bodies, or being trapped in a terrifying psychosis for days after just one use.
So you have to ask, right? What on earth is this stuff? What kind of drug could possibly be powerful enough to completely shatter someone's reality like that?
Okay, so to really understand this, we've got to start with just how dangerous these substances are. We're talking about a high that comes with an incredible and, frankly, often devastating price tag.
And this quote, this really hits it home. It's from Dr. Mark Ryan, a guy who was right on the front lines when this whole crisis blew up. He calls it a nightmare cocktail. And that's the perfect way to put it. It's not just one bad thing. It's like they took the worst parts of a bunch of different drugs and fused them all together.
And you can see just how fast this all happened by looking at the numbers. Look at this. In late 2010, you had about 300 calls to poison control centers in the US. The very next year, that number jumped to over 6,000. That's not a slow burn, folks. That is a full-blown explosion.
Okay, so what are these things really? If they're not for the bath, then what's actually in those little packets?
The scientific name is synthetic cathinones. Basically, they're stimulants that are cooked up in a lab. They're chemically related to a substance you'd find in a plant called khat. But the key word, the really important word here, is synthetic. These man-made versions, they are way, way more powerful and completely unpredictable.
So, let's be super clear. The name bath salts is 100% a disguise. It's a marketing trick. The stuff itself is usually a fine powder. It looks nothing like the Epsom salts you'd use in a tub. It was all a clever and really dangerous way to sell a powerful drug right out in the open.
And the deception didn't just stop with the name. Oh no. Sellers got really creative. They would label these packets as plant food, or jewelry cleaner, or glass cleaner. And then, the real kicker, they'd slap on a label saying not for human consumption. It was all a game to try and get around the law. And then you have these catchy street names, Cloud9, Ivory Wave, White Lightning. It was all designed to fly under the radar.
So, you might be wondering, what was the appeal? Why did this stuff catch on so fast? Well, two big reasons. It was cheap, and it was marketed as a legal high. For as little as, say, $15, people were promised this intense experience, something that was supposed to be like more expensive drugs like cocaine.
All right, let's get into the science of it. How exactly do these drugs hijack your brain and cause such chaos?
At their core, these synthetic cathinones are specifically designed to copy the effects of stimulants we're all more familiar with, like cocaine or meth. They're engineered in a lab to give you that same big rush of energy and euphoria. The problem is, the chemists who make this stuff often push it to a whole new, much more dangerous level.
So, just to put this in perspective, picture the power of cocaine. Got it? Now multiply that by 10.
And I'm not just throwing that number out there. That 10x is not an exaggeration. One of the really common ingredients in bath salts, a chemical called MDPV, has been shown to be up to 10 times stronger than cocaine. That's like taking a go-kart and strapping a rocket engine to it. The results are going to be intense and unpredictable.
I mean, look at this. The difference in potency is just staggering. If this bar here represents the stimulant effect of cocaine, then MDPV, well, it's not even in the same league. It's on a completely different planet.
So how does it work in the brain? Well, think of it like this. Your brain has these revolving doors for feel-good chemicals, right? Dopamine, serotonin. What these drugs do is they come in and just jam that door shut. So all those chemicals can't get cleared out. They just build up and up, flooding the brain. And that is what creates that incredibly intense, overwhelming, and, dangerously artificial high.
And as you can imagine, a flood like that in your brain, it inevitably leads to chaos. So let's talk about the fallout, because it's absolutely devastating for both the mind and the body.
And when we say damage, we mean it's total. It hits everything. For the mind, you're looking at severe paranoia, terrifying hallucinations, psychosis, even extreme aggression and violence. And at the same time, the body is just getting hammered. We're talking a racing heart, blood pressure through the roof. And in the worst cases, we see chest pains, heart attacks, seizures, strokes, kidney and liver failure. It's a full-body meltdown.
Now, with effects that powerful, it's pretty obvious that the risk of addiction is going to be incredibly high. So, what does that look like? And is there a way out?
Yeah, after everything we've just talked about, is it even a question? The answer is a huge, definitive yes.
Make no mistake, bath salts are intensely addictive. And when a person tries to quit, the withdrawal they face is just brutal. We're talking about cravings that are off the charts, terrible anxiety and depression, not being able to sleep, plus all this shaking and paranoia. Trying to quit this stuff alone is, well, it's almost impossible. So is there hope? Absolutely. Now, there's no magic pill you can take to cure the addiction, but things like behavioral therapies, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can be really effective. It helps people learn new ways to cope, to change the thought patterns that got them there in the first place. Recovery is definitely possible.
And finally, this is really important. If you're ever with someone who's in trouble from this stuff, there are a few practical things you can do. First off, hydration is a huge deal, so try to get them to drink water. Second, do not leave them alone. Have a sober person stay with them no matter what. And third, you have to know when to call for help. Chest pain, seizures, losing control of their muscles, those are emergencies. You call 911 immediately.
Which really brings us to the big, challenging question for the future, right? The chemists making these drugs can tweak the formula just a tiny bit to create a new, technically legal compound. It's this constant, high-stakes game of cat and mouse with law enforcement. So the question we're left with is this. As these underground labs keep innovating, how do we possibly stay one step ahead of the next big designer drug?